Death did not come slowly for me. It arrived like a thief, brutal and sudden, ripping me from the fragile comfort of the life I thought I had under control. One moment I was standing in the kitchen of my quiet home, sunlight spilling across the counter as I poured a glass of water, and the next, my chest seized with a pain so sharp it felt like a blade tearing through my heart. My body stiffened, the glass slipped from my hand, and the world tilted. In that instant, I collapsed, hitting the floor with a force that shook the room. I remember the sound of shattering glass, the water spilling across the tiles, my fingers twitching helplessly against the cold surface. My heart stopped, my breath faltered, the edges of my vision darkened, until everything collapsed into black. But that was only the beginning. What struck me first was the silence, not the silence of sleep or unconsciousness, but a silence that felt alive, pressing in on me, suffocating me. I became aware that my body lay lifeless on the floor, yet I was not inside it anymore. I hovered above it, suspended, weightless, staring down at my own pale face, eyes wide open but unseeing. It should have terrified me, but in that moment, I felt no panic. Instead, I felt a strange detachment, like I was watching someone else's tragedy. Then the pull began. It started as a vibration deep inside me, a hum that grew louder and stronger, until it felt like the whole universe was dragging me towards something vast and unseen. I was ripped upward and outward, past the ceiling, past the confines of my home, past the very air itself. My spirit stretched into a realm I had never imagined, a place where space and time lost their meaning. At first, I thought I was ascending toward light, the way so many stories had described, but what greeted me was not peace, it was darkness, thick, suffocating, endless darkness that swallowed everything. The air smelled of smoke, sharp and bitter, searing my senses though I had no lungs to breathe. My spirit trembled as I realized I was not being lifted to heaven. I was being dragged down. The descent was violent. I felt myself plunging into layers of shadow, deeper and deeper, as screams rose around me, faint at first, and then deafening. They were not human screams as I had known them on earth. They carried agony that pierced to the marrow of the soul, cries that told of torment beyond comprehension. And then I saw it, the entrance. A vast, jagged chasm split open before me, its walls glowing with molten fire. Rivers of lava flowed like blood through the cracks, their heat burning even in the realm of spirit. A wind howled upward, carrying the stench of sulfur and decay. The ground itself seemed alive, pulsing like the veins of a dying beast, and from within that abyss, the cries of countless souls rose like smoke. Hell, I had heard preachers speak of it, read warnings in scripture, but to see it, to feel it, was something no human heart could endure. Fear wrapped around me like chains, dragging me closer. My spirit fought, but resistance was useless. I was being drawn in, claimed by something ancient and relentless. I entered. The landscape was endless. Flames towered like mountains, consuming everything but never dying down. Souls writhed within them, their shapes distorted, their faces etched with eternal despair. Some clawed at their own skin, trying to tear free from the fire that had become part of them. Others collapsed under shadows that mocked and tormented them, whispers of regret echoing in their ears. Every cry, every scream, was a confession of choices they could never undo. I walked, or rather, drifted through this inferno, though it felt as though I was being led, as if unseen hands guided me through its horrors. My senses were heightened beyond anything earthly. I did not just see their pain, I felt the weight of their regret pressed on my spirit, until I thought I would break. The flames licked at me though they did not consume, searing my soul with the reality of judgment. What stunned me most was who I recognized. These were not just vague, faceless strangers. Among them were people I had known, neighbors, co-workers, even a family acquaintance, whose funeral I had attended years ago. Their faces were twisted in agony, their eyes wide with the hopeless knowledge that there was no escape. Some seemed to recognize me, their gazes locking on mine as if begging for help, for mercy. but I could do nothing. I was as powerless as they were, only a witness to their torment. Time did not exist there. It felt like hours, yet also only moments, as I was shown place after place of torment. Caverns where souls were bound in chains of shadow, dragged into pits, where fire burned but gave no light. Rivers of molten flame, where voices rose like a chorus of despair, each scream blending into a single unending cry. And through it all, the sense that this was not chaos, it was order, perfect, dreadful order, justice carried out in a way the human mind cannot fully comprehend. I realized then that I was not just passing through, I was being shown. This was a revelation, a warning, not only for me but for anyone who would hear my testimony. I felt the presence of something greater watching over it all, not with cruelty, but with sorrow and unshakable authority. It was as if the very holiness of God illuminated this place, showing me that His justice is as real as His mercy. The longer I remained, the heavier it grew. My spirit weakened under the weight of despair. I began to wonder if I would ever leave, if I had been brought here to remain forever, to share the fate of those I saw. Fear gripped me tighter than ever before. I cried out, not with words but with the core of my being, for mercy, for release, for anything but this endless torment. And then, in the distance, I saw it, a glimmer, a faint, pure light breaking through the thick smoke, piercing the flames like a blade. My spirit surged toward it, desperate, drawn as though by instinct. The screams around me grew louder, as if the very souls of the damned resented that I was being pulled toward hope, but nothing could stop. The light widened, a doorway opening, and I was lifted upward away from the fire, away from the screams. As I rose, the memory of what I had seen burned itself into me. It was not a dream, it was not imagination, it was real, terribly, undeniably real. And I knew, even before I returned to my body, that my life would never be the same. The light that pulled me upward from the flames was not gentle, it was violent, tearing me out of hell's grip as if I were being ripped from the jaws of a beast. My spirit tumbled through the door, clawing currents until, suddenly, I broke through. For the first time since leaving my body, I felt something other than despair. I felt weightless, suspended in a vast space that shimmered with both silence and power. But even there, I could not escape the memory. The screams clung to me like smoke, echoing in my being. My cousin's funeral years ago replayed in my mind, the hushed whispers, the polished casket, the carefully chosen hymns. I had mourned her then, but in hell I had seen her soul burning. I had seen regret carved into her like fire upon stone. That image branded itself into me, tormenting me as much as the flames themselves. As I drifted in that threshold between light and shadow, I realized I was not simply escaping hell, I was being shown something deeper, more dreadful, more personal. The space around me shifted. What looked like fragments of my own life began to play out, projected across the darkness as if my soul were the canvas. I saw myself as a child, kneeling at the bedside with my mother as she prayed, her words soft and full of faith. Then the scene shifted, and I was older, rolling my eyes at her, shrugging off the warnings she gave me about eternity. I saw myself laughing with friends, speaking words that cut others, holding grudges I never released. Each image pierced me, because I could no longer deny it. Sin was not just what I had done, it was who I had allowed myself to become. The visions grew sharper, every unforgiven wound, every prideful thought, every careless sin rose like chains wrapping around me. I began to understand, the same unforgiveness that had chained my cousin to eternal fire could chain me as well. The weight of judgment pressed down, and I trembled under it. I was not innocent. I was not ready, and eternity was no longer a concept. It was reality. Then the presence came. I cannot describe it as a figure, or a face, or even a voice. It was simply presence, holy, overwhelming, consuming. It filled the space around me with a brilliance that burned deeper than fire. I did not see eyes, but I felt watched, known, measured. Every part of who I was lay bare before that presence. No excuses, no pretense, no hiding. The brilliance was not cruel, but it was absolute. It revealed me fully, and I realized then that judgment was not about comparing myself to others. It was about standing against the perfection of holiness itself. The terror of hell was crushing, but the terror of standing before pure holiness was even greater. I knew that if not for mercy, I would crumble, I would shatter into nothing. As the presence pressed in on me, I heard not with ears, but deep within, what felt like a question, not in words but in weight, a demand for truth. Who was I? What had I lived for? What had I chosen? The images of my life swirled faster, surrounding me. Times I had chosen bitterness over forgiveness. Times I had chosen pride over humility. Times I had silenced the quiet tug of God's Spirit and gone my own way. Each memory cut deeper, and the shame became unbearable. I wanted to hide, but there was nowhere to go. Then the scene shifted again, dragging me back toward the borders of hell. The fire loomed in the distance, and once again I saw souls writhing. Their cries filled the air like thunder, and for the first time, I realized some of them looked at me, their eyes locked on mine, pleading, accusing. It was as if they were screaming, "Warn them, do not let them come here, do not waste the chance you've been given." I felt torn apart. The fire pulled at me, but the light above drew me higher. I did not know which way I would go. I only knew that eternity was demanding an answer. My chest ached with the weight of every choice I had made in life. My cousin's screams still haunted me, her torment echoing through the flames. Would that be me one day? Would I waste my chance? And then suddenly, the presence that had exposed me shifted. It radiated warmth, not softness, not weakness, but mercy, pure undeserved mercy. I felt it like a hand extended toward me, offering not escape from truth, but redemption in the face of it. It did not erase my sin, it revealed it even more clearly, but it also revealed that grace was stronger than sin. For the first time since my collapse, I wept, not with tears of flesh, but with the raw weeping of a soul. I felt my hardness break, my defenses shatter, the bitterness, the pride, the unforgiveness. I saw them for what they were, chains dragging me toward the same fate as my cousin. And in that moment, I knew I had to let them go. The more I surrendered, the stronger the light grew. It pulled me away from the flames, away from the darkness, closer to life. I felt weight falling from me, not because I had earned freedom, but because mercy had reached me. The contrast was unbearable. Hell's endless torment below, grace's overwhelming light above, and I, Ruth, suspended between them, trembling, had been given a glimpse of both. As the light carried me higher, the visions of hell began to fade into the distance, but the memory never left. I could still hear the cries, still smell the sulfur, still feel the heat against my soul. The horror was etched into me forever, but over it all, the whisper of mercy remained, reminding me that I had been given what others had lost, a second chance. And then, like a sudden storm breaking, I felt the pull back to earth. My body, lifeless on the floor of my kitchen, drew me downward. The pain of flesh, the heaviness of mortality, slammed into me as though I had been dropped from heaven into dust. My chest convulsed, air ripped into my lungs, my heart staggered into rhythm. I was alive, but I was not the same. The first gasp of air tore through my chest like fire. My body convulsed, writhing as though rejecting the weight of flesh after being suspended in eternity. Every nerve screamed, every heartbeat pounded like thunder, but nothing compared to the crushing awareness of what I had just lived, or rather what I had just died through. The paramedics later told me that I had been gone for over 10 minutes, no pulse, no breath, nothing. But in those 10 minutes, I had seen what most people spend their lives trying not to think about. I had seen hell, I had seen mercy, I had seen judgment, and I knew that nothing about my life could remain the same. Lying in the hospital bed days later, I stared at the ceiling, the fluorescent lights flickering like pale imitations of the fire, and the light I had witnessed beyond. My body was weak, bruised, stitched back together by human hands, but my spirit was raw, wide open. Sleep brought no rest. Each time I closed my eyes, I heard the screams again, saw my cousin's face contorted in eternal torment, felt the heat of those flames pressing against me, and when I woke, I wept, not because I feared death anymore, but because I understood the weight of eternity in a way I never had before. The bitterness I had carried for years rose in my chest like poison. Every grudge, every silent resentment, every hardened corner of my heart, they all looked different now. They looked like chains. I realized that hell is not only filled with murderers or criminals, it is filled with people who held on to the very things I had clung to: unforgiveness, pride, selfishness. I knew then that if I did not change, my story could end the same way my cousins had. So I began to let go. It was not easy. Forgiving people who had wounded me felt like tearing open old scars, but each time I whispered forgiveness, each time I surrendered my pride, I felt the weight lift from my soul. It was as though the chains I had carried in silence were snapping, one by one. I found myself weeping, not just for myself, but for the countless souls I had seen in hell, souls who had never been willing to let go, who had never chosen mercy. Every face I passed on the street looked different to me after that day. I no longer saw strangers. I saw souls, each person walking, working, laughing, had an eternity ahead of them, one they might not be ready for. Some carried a faint light, others carried shadows, and every time I looked, I thought, if they only knew, if they only understood what waits beyond one heart. The weight of that knowledge pressed me into a calling I could not ignore. My testimony was not mine to hide. If God had given me a second chance, it was not for comfort, it was for warning. I had been sent back to speak, to cry out, to tell the world what I had seen: that hell is real, judgment is real, eternity is real, and no one escapes it. But with that calling came fear. What would people think? Would they laugh at me? Would they dismiss me as delusional? As a woman whose brain had scrambled during a medical crisis, I battled those doubts every day, and yet every night the screams returned, tearing through my silence. My cousin's burning face haunted me until I could not bear to stay silent any longer. So I began to speak, quietly at first, with family, with close friends. Some believed me, their eyes filled with tears as they listened. Others shook their heads, their lips twisting with pity or mockery, but I knew it did not matter. The truth was not mine to water down. Eternity does not wait for our approval. It comes, whether we believe it or not. As the weeks passed, my testimony grew stronger, not because I enjoyed retelling the horror, but because every time I spoke, I remembered why I had been spared. My story was not about me. It was about God's mercy and His warning. It was about the souls, still alive, still breathing, still able to choose. And so now I speak to you, the one hearing my story. I, Ruth, a woman who thought she had time, a woman who thought she could carry bitterness to her grave, stand before you alive, only because of mercy. I spent a day in hell. I saw the torment. I felt the despair, and I am here to tell you, it is not a place you want to find yourself. Do not gamble with eternity, the unforgiveness you carry, the pride you protect, the sins you excuse. They are chains, chains that hell will gladly claim the moment your heartbeat stops. But there is mercy, there is still time. If you turn now, if you repent, if you forgive, if you surrender, you can be free. This is not a dream, this is not imagination, this is testimony. I was gone, I was shown, and I was sent back to warn you. So hear me now. Choose life, choose mercy, choose God, because one day, sooner than you think, your soul will leave your body, just as mine did, and when it does, there will be no second chance. Repent while there is breath in your lungs. Forgive while there is still time. Surrender before eternity seals your choice. I spent a day in hell, and I am telling you, fear God. If this testimony shook you, subscribe to this channel, share it, let others hear it, because tomorrow is not promised, but eternity never ends.